There comes a moment when the world you've known no longer feels like home. A whisper calls from beyond the veil, urging you to remember who you are, where you've been, and what you've yet to become. This is the Seeker's journey, a path of questions, revelations, and truths hidden in plain sight. Will you listen? Will you awaken? Ayak never imagined that a single speech could unravel everything she thought she knew. But when Ewa'ay spoke of hidden truths, of reincarnation, the power of the mind, and the cosmic forces shaping their lives, something inside her stirred. It was more than curiosity. It was recognition. A knowing she could not explain, only feel. Now the whispers grow louder. The realms call her name. Each step she takes leads her closer to answers, yet deeper into the mystery. And in the shadows of the unknown, two figures stand: Ewa'ay, the guide who speaks in riddles, and Ogayway, the enigma she cannot escape. The path to awakening has begun. But is Ayak ready for what lies beyond the veil? Now, let's listen to the story. The sun had barely risen, but the rhythm of the morning was already in motion, as if unseen hands had wound up the people like clockwork. Ogayway was at the riverbank, standing barefoot in the cool mud, arms raised in his usual sunrise ritual. He greeted the sun like an old friend, whispering words only he seemed to understand. Not far from him, Ewa'ay sat by her wooden table, grinding herbs in rhythmic circles, humming a tune that never changed. The villagers, too, moved with predictable steps. The women fetched water, the men sharpened tools, the elders sat in their usual spots, shaking their heads at the young. And Manso was already by the marketplace, lecturing a group of eager listeners about discipline, tradition, and the dangers of questioning too much. Ayak exhaled sharply. They are all programmed, she thought, even the ones who think they are free. She turned to Ogayway as he stepped onto the dry ground, shaking mud from his feet. "Tell me, Ogayway, do you not see it?" she asked. "Everyone here is moving like the spokes of a wheel, turning in the same patterns every day, even you." Ogayway smiled as he reached for his beaded staff. "And what would you have them do, Ayak? Scatter like fallen seeds? A river must flow in a path, or it is no river at all." Ayak folded her arms. "That's just another way of saying they have no choice. People wake, they work, they think as they were taught. Is that not programming?" Ogayway chuckled, brushing dust from his robe. "You speak as if programming is a prison. But tell me, Ayak, if a man chooses to wake before dawn, chooses to dance with the sun, chooses to speak to the wind, is he programmed, or is he free?" Ayak hesitated. Ogayway's eyes twinkled. "Perhaps you believe I am bound by my rituals, but have you considered that I am the one holding the strings?" Before Ayak could answer, a voice interrupted them. "The problem is not programming," Manso declared, stepping forward with his hands behind his back. "The problem is those who think they can break it." His gaze was sharp, his tone firm. "A bird may think it is caged, but the walls are there to keep it safe. What happens when a bird that was never meant to fly suddenly believes it can?" A strange silence followed. Ogayway grinned. "Ah, Manso, always eager to defend the cage." Manso's jaw tightened. "Not all cages are prisons, Ogayway." Ayak looked between the two men, her pulse quickening. She had started this conversation seeking answers. But now, she had a feeling she was about to uncover far more than she had expected. Manso folded his arms, standing firm like a tree that had weathered many storms. "You mock the idea of structure, Ogayway, but it is what keeps a people from falling into chaos. Culture, tradition, law, these are the pillars that hold a civilization together. Without them, we are nothing." Ogayway leaned on his staff, amused. "Nothing? Or something different?" Ayak watched them closely, intrigued. "But how do we know that these pillars were built for us, Manso? What if they were put there to keep us from seeing beyond them?" Manso shook his head, spoken like someone who does not understand history. "Our ancestors passed down these ways for a reason. Without their teachings, we would not know the ways of the spirits, the proper ways to pray, how to respect the gods. Or do you believe that should all be abandoned too? Ogayway laughed. Ah, the gods! Tell me, Manso, were you there when they first spoke? Or were you programmed to believe what was written by men long before you? Manso's eyes darkened. You mock the divine? I question, Ogayway corrected. And in questioning, I find my own truth instead of borrowing one. Ayak's curiosity burned brighter. So are you saying the gods are not real, Ogayway? Ogayway looked at her, his gaze unreadable. What I am saying, Ayak, is that even the gods can be programmed into the mind of a child before that child learns to ask, who am I really? Manso scoffed. Dangerous thinking. If people began questioning the gods, they would begin questioning morality itself. That is why spiritual programming exists, to remind us of what is right and wrong. Ewa'ay, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. Right and wrong? She echoed softly. And who decides? Manso turned to her, confident. The divine, through the teachings of our ancestors. Ewa'ay nodded slowly, stirring her bowl of herbs. And if those ancestors were blind to something greater? Manso frowned. Impossible? Ewa'ay chuckled. Impossible or unthinkable. You speak as though the world does not evolve. What if the gods they gave us were merely the shadows of something even greater? What if truth itself is a river that does not stay in one place? A hush fell over them. Ayak felt a strange pressure in her chest, as though her mind were on the edge of unraveling something. Then are we all just living inside an idea that was given to us before we were even born? Ogayway tapped his staff against the ground. Exactly. The real question is, do you have the courage to rewrite the idea? Manso's voice was steel. And what if rewriting it brings destruction? Ewa'ay's eyes glowed with mystery. And what if it brings freedom? The air was thick with something unseen, something deeper than words. Ayak swallowed. This was no longer just a debate. This was a moment of awakening. And she was no longer sure which path she was meant to take. The evening air carried the scent of burning wood as the villagers settled into their nightly routines. Ayak sat between Ogayway and Ewa'ay, staring at the flickering flames before them. Manso stood nearby, arms crossed, watching the fire as though it carried the weight of all wisdom. Ayak finally spoke. I see it now, she murmured. Everyone here is moving within patterns they did not choose. Ogayway grinned. Ah, the light of awareness flickers in your mind. Manso exhaled sharply. Patterns are not prisons. They are the bones of civilization. Without them, people would be lost. But what if some of these patterns are shackles, Manso? Ayak challenged. What if they hold us back instead of lifting us forward? Manso scoffed. And who decides what is a shackle and what is a foundation? Ewa'ay stirred her herbs. Truth does. Silence. Ayak turned to Ogayway. I see the programming now, but how do I know where it is limiting me? Ogayway smiled. Let's play a game. I will call the chains by name, and you tell me if you have ever worn them. Ayak leaned forward. Go on. Ogayway's voice softened. Have you ever done something? Not because you wanted to, but because it was expected of you? Ayak thought of the times she bit her tongue in the presence of elders, followed customs she did not understand, or feared the judgment of others for thinking differently. She sighed. Yes, many times. Ewa'ay added. Culture is meant to guide, not cage. But when it is followed without question, it becomes a chain. Manso frowned. And without it, who would we be? Culture holds the wisdom of our ancestors. Ogayway chuckled. Or the fears of our ancestors. Ogayway turned to Ayak again. Have you ever feared something, not because you saw it yourself, but because you were told to fear it? Ayak hesitated. She had been taught that questioning the gods was dangerous, that spirits should be feared, that rituals must be followed without deviation. She clenched her fists. Yes, Manso shook his head. And rightly so. Some things are not meant to be questioned. Ewa'ay raised an eyebrow. And who decides which things? Manso's jaw tightened. The ancestors. Ogayway smirked. And did they tell you this themselves? Or were you simply programmed? Manso bristled. Some truths are not meant to be discovered by questioning. Ogayway's eyes twinkled. And yet, the greatest truths are always found by those who question. Ogayway's voice softened. Have you ever believed something about yourself that made you feel small? A thought that whispered you were not enough? Ayak's stomach twisted. She had believed she was not wise enough, not worthy enough, not strong enough to stand against the expectations placed on her. She looked away. Yes. Ogayway's smile faded. That is the worst programming of all. The one that makes you believe you are less than what you truly are. Ewa'ay reached for a dried leaf, crumbling it between her fingers. A mind filled with such thoughts will always kneel, even when it is meant to stand. Manso folded his arms. Not all thoughts are false. Some are there to keep us humble. Ogayway tapped his staff against the earth. And some are there to keep you small. Ogayway's voice turned mischievous. Have you ever believed that struggling is noble? That suffering is honorable? That wealth is reserved for others but not for you? Ayak frowned. She had heard it many times. That suffering made one worthy. That abundance was for the lucky few. She exhaled. Yes. Ogayway's expression darkened. A powerful spell, that one. The belief that to rise is greedy, that to break free is selfish. Ewa'ay met Manso's gaze. Would you not want your children to eat well, to live freely, to thrive? Manso hesitated. Of course, but… Ogayway cut him off. But? The moment you say but, you have revealed the program running beneath your words. Manso's lips parted, but no words came. Ayak rubbed her temples. So, everything is programming? Ogayway laughed. Not everything, Ayak. But much of what you think is truth is simply repetition. The question is, do you choose the program, or does it choose you? Manso shook his head. Dangerous thinking. If people abandoned these structures, the world would fall apart. Ewa'ay smiled. Or it would be reborn. Ayak looked at the fire, her heart pounding. Everything she had been taught, everything she had believed, was it truly hers? Or was it time to reprogram her mind? The fire crackled, sending fleeting sparks into the night. Ayak stared at the flames, her thoughts tangled in the web of questions Ogayway had spun. I see it now, she admitted, her voice quieter than before. We live in a world of inherited thoughts, passed down like heirlooms. Some are treasures, some are chains. Ogayway nodded, a glimmer of satisfaction in his eyes. The first step to freedom is seeing the bars of the cage. Manso exhaled sharply. And what if the cage is all that keeps us safe? Ewa'ay chuckled softly, shaking her head. A bird born in a cage believes flying is dangerous. Manso scowled but said nothing. Ayak looked between them, her mind still unraveling the invisible strings that had been pulling at her thoughts for years. If we are all programmed, she said slowly, then how do we change it? How do we reprogram the mind? Ogayway leaned back and stretched, his expression unreadable. Ah, now that is a different question altogether. Ewa'ay placed a hand on Ayak's shoulder. One that requires more than just words. It requires understanding, discipline, and the courage to let go of what you thought was true. Ayak frowned. So, when do we begin? Ogayway grinned, his eyes gleaming with mischief. Oh, Ayak, we already have. The fire flickered as the weight of his words settled over them. Somewhere in the distance, a drumbeat echoed through the village, steady and rhythmic, like a pulse, like a program running in the background. Ayak listened, wondering how many rhythms she had followed without question, and which ones she was ready to change. To be continued. So, as these words settle within you, know that they are more than just stories. They are doorways. Doorways to understanding, to remembrance, to awakening. You are not here by accident. You have been called to listen, to reflect, and to rise. But this is only the beginning. The journey ahead is vast, filled with mysteries yet to unfold. With each story, a new key is placed in your hands, unlocking the depths of your being. Will you dare to step forward? Prepare yourself, for the next chapter will take you deeper, beyond what is seen, beyond what is known, into the realm where truth awaits those who seek it. If you like the content and are inspired to hear more, don't forget to like and share. Till next time, stay blessed.